You're predicting, I think, even higher prices by the end of the year. So why do you feel that way?
Well, for equities, it's really straightforward. Number one, the economy has proven to be incredibly resilient. I mean, I don't think people should take a half-empty take. We've thrown massive tariffs. We had essentially a Cuban Missile Crisis moment, and yet S&P earnings are going to grow 12% this quarter. And there's not any signs really of sustained or a reigniting of inflation. There might be some inflation temporary, but that's very different than inflation dynamic taking root. And the second is people says that deficits and this current budget are so bad that no one's going to buy our debt, but yields are behaving. 10-year yield was 5%. 2 years ago, it's 4.5% now. And in terms of multiples, I think people are getting this wrong. There's a lot of people saying the market's expensive because the PE of the market should be the average of 16 or 17. Now, I've been an equity analyst for 34 years, and I used to cover stocks. I was a tech analyst for 17 of those years. I never once found an analyst who made money saying you should trade at an average PE. Like literally you either have arguments for PE expanding, and then you just have to determine when you hit bubble, or PEs contract when the story is getting worse and there's no bottom. And we just threw 6 extinction events at this S&P 500 in the last 5 years. COVID, then a bullwhip supply chain, the fact that normally should bankrupt businesses. We had the fastest surge in inflation in 2 generations, the fastest Fed hikes in history. We had tariff Armageddon. I mean, literally a Cuban Missile Crisis moment for the stock market this year. And then the U.S. bombed Iran's nuclear facilities. Each of those should have caused a crash in the stock market. And yet the S&P recovered every time. If we were talking about this as a single stock, we'd say, look, if you threw 6 things at a company and it survived, it should have PE expansion. And yet most people think the market's expensive.
Coin Stories is proudly brought to you by Gemini. Investing in Bitcoin, and you can get it Bitwise. They CIO Matt Hogan, one of the best minds in the business. I highly recommend it. It's witty, bold, and quick. It takes just 5 minutes to read each week. So head over to bitwiseinvestments.com/CIO. And always, of course, carefully consider the extreme risks associated with crypto. Coin Stories is also brought to you by BitDeer, a global leader in disruptive technology for Bitcoin mining and high-performance computing for AI. BitDeer trades under the stock ticker BTDR and boasts more than 2.5 gigawatts of electrical capacity across 3 continents. Learn more at bitdeer.com. Well, a lot of people are concerned about the debt, though, because isn't a lot of this liquidity coming from the fact that the government has been spending a lot, and we're having Congress continue to spend, and we just passed another $5 trillion bill? What are we going to do to solve the debt when all of this is essentially just pumping up stocks?
When I graduated college and I moved to New York City, and then at Union Square, there was this billboard that had the national debt, and it went up every day. And I worked at Kidder Peabody, and we had people saying, oh, does anyone realize how big the national debt is? How much it is for every man, woman, and child? That was 35 years ago. So 35 years later, I hear the same exact conversation. So I think it is a problem. This is weird. I obviously don't want the U.S. government debt to grow, but is it a crisis? It seems like capital markets are functioning. So yes, it's a crisis, but I don't know when it's a crisis.
That's a good point. So do you think that the Fed should lower interest rates? And if they do so, let's say in September, what will the market reaction be?
Well, part of FundStrat's sort of framework is that we don't say what policymakers should do. Okay? But I can offer a separate opinion. And the reason is that we just have to respond to those market conditions. And that's why, for instance, I think people got really tripped up this year because there is Trump derangement syndrome. And so they viewed policy actions like tariffs as policy errors, whereas at FundStrat, we just simply wanted to see how we should treat the market and trade that market. And the Fed, I don't have an opinion if the Fed should be cutting or not. Because Powell is Fed chair and whatever he decides is correct. But if I was a computer and using AI to make policy decisions, then I would say that the real interest rate is super restrictive right now because core CPI is 2.7, or core PCE, we'll get it tomorrow, and Fed funds is 4.5. That's 200 basis points real. The housing industry is getting strangulated, and the only reason both core PCE and core CPI are elevated is because of that what they call a statistical residual way that rent is calculated, shelter is calculated. Housing is deflating, but it's still treated as inflating the CPI. So that is literally making a policy decision based on something that's stale. So
if they were to lower interest rates, banks have past experience. I feel like if they hike interest rates, that's risk off. But also when they lower interest rates, sometimes all of a sudden the markets get squeezed and sell off and go into safety. Would you anticipate? I mean, I don't think that they would cut more than 25 basis points, but if they cut more, wouldn't that signal something to the market?
I think everyone has different interpretation. Like, again, that's why I don't have an idea what the Fed should do. But if the Fed were to resume cutting, there's a bearish and a bullish take you can make. Because, like, the bearish take is, oh, man, the economy's in trouble. That's finally getting the inflation has to get cut. And how the market ends up interpreting it, we'll find out. I don't know.
So what's your take on Bitcoin as we head into, say, the fourth quarter, eventually in the fall? Do you think we're going higher?
Well, I think that, to me, the simplest way to think about Bitcoin is that it's gaining traction as a replacement for gold. I think that if someone wanted to understand the use case for Bitcoin, and there's many, but they're not too. They don't have a lot of conviction around something. To me, I could say easily it should supplant gold. And so I think Bitcoin should be, over $1 million over time. And then I kind of prescribing to the view that there's probably a chance that maybe the 4-year cycle is ending for Bitcoin because of the way institutional adoption of that thesis is taking place. And so you have institutional and essentially permanent holders of Bitcoin coming in. So it should be good. So I think Bitcoin should really build upon this 120 before the end of the year. So 200,000, maybe 250.
I think by the end of the year. I would love to get your take on the corporate Bitcoin treasuries because we're seeing so many more emerge. Some people are a little nervous. They don't think that all of them can survive or that it might create some sort of a bubble similar to the dot-com era. Others are extremely bullish on literally all of them. So where are you at?
Well, you can't create a bubble because you're buying Bitcoin. So unless you think Bitcoin's a bubble, it's not a bubble. Right? I think the crypto treasuries there's going to be winners and losers because there is a scarcity to it, actually. So Bitcoin is scarce, and so it's proper for companies to have Bitcoin on their balance sheet over time. And I think banks will, because as Bitcoin really does get recognized in its proper place as how you move money in the financial system, then the banking sector will actually stay with Bitcoin as well. They're going to want to own it. And so these treasuries are doing what other businesses will eventually do. But for them to get a premium to their Bitcoin because of how they're executing a strategy, that is the scarce part. MicroStrategy has already proven that their strategy works because they started on August 12, 2020. They bought 269 Bitcoin. Stock was $13. Now they own close to 5% of the Bitcoin network.
Yeah.
And they announced a huge buy last week, but the stock is 400. It's gone up 30 times. So that's truly executed in a masterful way. I don't know if the 50 other Bitcoin treasury companies are. I don't know how many are. I actually looked at that website.
BitcoinTreasuries.net.
Yeah, and there's like 50 companies. Not all of them are doing treasury strategy.
Right.
But I think a handful will emerge as winners, but not everyone.
Bullish on
Fuck's sake.
others? Like, can you name any?
Well, I would say, again,
Fuck's sake, that was
I don't necessarily
so
want to necessarily
shit.
recommend one or the other, except for one that's in our granny shots. But I'd say that there's been differentiation, like there's a geographic difference.
Stupid.
So in Japan, there aren't any dips, so Metaplanet's been amazing, and in the UK, there's a handful of names. And then there's one just emerged in Korea. So it is a geographically diverse thing. They have an opportunity to distinguish themselves. But because of what I've seen in treasuries, that there is a certain alchemy that MicroStrategy has, which is MicroStrategy has made MicroStrategy shareholders into customers. I mean, he has
I gotta restart this thing.
every shareholder with MicroStrategy, and he has maintained a premium, and he has transformed capital markets. That